Yeah, so we're going to start with this rendering of a list. From there, we're going to move to these handling events and couple with this state here because it is very important that you know how to work with state in your component. And what is state? State is just a value that can change from one value to another value. For example, now you have a counter app or you have a button on your screen that you can click. And when you click on the button, the state of your component is going to change to another state there. So how do you keep tracking of the values that you are changing are there? So you need a state to hold whatever the state of the value at that particular time that you are working with your component there like that. So, but the first thing we're going to be talking about is this rendering of a list. And what is rendering of a list? This is a way of you rendering your content. So for example here, where is it? So let me go to this app here. So assuming we have a list of users, and for each user we want to display card, like a user. Now we're going to have their name. For example, we're going to have their name, we're going to have their post and some other details about the user. Now imagine we have 100 users and we need to display all of them. So how do you handle this kind of a UI? So you know that you are going to create a component to display a user. For example, here now, down here, I'm going to create a component. The name of the component is going to be user info like this. So this is the name of the component. This component is going to receive the props there like that. And what is it going to do? So let me just do it like this. Okay, let me use this. I don't want this thing to show errors. So props, and let me convert it to a function so that like this other one, so that it doesn't complain that we are defining it under here. So we have this function, and what is this function going to do? I'm just going to return a basic stuff about user. So the first thing is that we're going to have the user, the full name of the user. So here I'm going to have props. Don't forget what is props. So full name like this. So after the full name of the user, so under here, we're going to have the what's that? So what can I add? So props dot job like this. So what's the job of the user like that? So let me convert this into calculator so that you can see the correct. So this is our component. And what is the job of this component? Is just to display these two info. But now imagine you are working on a site that have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 users, and this user that you have there, the users, so it's like array of a user there. So how do you now convert this array of user that you have into a proper component that you can display on the screen? So if you want to work on this now, what you do where you want to use it is by doing your return. So here we need to return, and inside this our return, what do I need to do? So I'm going to have a div that is going to wrap everything, and inside the div I'm going to call my user info. So this one is just for one user. If you have one user, this is how you're going to do it. When you're going to pass the full name, which is going to be Banti like this, then the job here is going to be developer. So this is the first user that we have there. And if I go to the page, we are going to have the user on the screen. But just like what I mentioned there, what if you have like 10 users? So what are you going to be? Are you not going to be, duplicating each one of them one by one like this? Okay, this one is going to be raster, and this one is going to be teacher like this. So if I save it, you see that we have another user on the screen. Now imagine you are working, and the list of the user, you don't really know them right now, but you know that you are going to receive like 10, 20, 40 list of user. So that thing that the user that you're going to receive later on now, how do you convert them to a component like this? This one is simple. The reason it's simple is because we know the name and we know the job. But what about all those the list of the user that we don't really know their names and the job, or the one that we even know but is a list? So in a list, for example here now, I'm going to have a list of objects which is having this full name, which is going to be the same thing that we have there. So Banti. So the job is going to be developer like this. And apart from this one, I'm still going to have another one down here, which is going to have a full name, which is going to be Rasta. And under it, I'm going to have the job, which is going to be teacher. So we have this list of user, and we want to do something like what we have here. So how do you do it? That's where the rendering of the list comes in, because React actually knows how to work with array. I've shown you what React is going to display for some of the common value that you can display on the screen. So we talk about the string, the number, and how the React is going to render it on the screen. We talk about the array, and now it's going to show it on the screen and so forth like that. So we can take the advantage of that, because anything that you send into the screen in array, React is just going to concat everything and concat. And what I mean by that is just going to join all of them together and then put it on the screen. So if I save this in now, this is array of numbers. And if I save it and just go back to the screen, you see that React is just joining everything together as if it's a string. So we can use this same knowledge too. Instead of us sending number like this, we can send array of component. But the problem here is that the component that you want to send here, it needs to receive some props. So how do we look through our array here? And based on that, we map it to a corresponding component that we want to display. That's where the rendering of the list, and we can use the features of array that is giving us it. If you still remember, on your array, you can map. And what is map? So here now, I have this list of array, and what do I want to do? I want to map it to their square. So what is the square of 1? It's going to be 1. What is the square of 3? That is going to be 9, like that. So what is the square of 5? That's 25, like that. And what is the square of 6? That's 36. So this is what we call map here. So this is your original data, but this your data here, you are mapping it to another set of data. And what are we mapping it to? We take each of the number and we map it to their square. So 1 is going to its square, 3 is going to its own square, 5 is going to its own square, and 6 so we go to its own square. And that's what we want to do here too. So we have list of users, and this list of users too, we want to map them to a component. So when you have this first user, we map it to its own component. This second user will map it to its own component, and so forth like that, depending on the number of user that you have in your application there. But how are you going to perform this mapping here? So how are you going to perform the mapping? So in React or in JavaScript in general, when you have an array, so let me go to the browser and perform this one, because this one is just normal JavaScript. It's not related to any React there like that. So let me just go to the console here so that I can showcase this thing and we'll put everything in practice there. So because you need to understand what is going on, which is just normal JavaScript. So yeah, I have an array of number here. So I have 1, just like the way we have it there. So I have 3, I have 5, and I have 6. But what I want to do, I want to create another array based on this one, but the new array that I want is going to be square of each number. So luckily for us, our array actually give us a function known as map. So this is a higher order function that you can use to talk to this your array that, okay, for each one of the element that is inside you, this is what I want you to return for it for a new value. Don't forget, we want to map this in to the square. So this higher order function, as you can see here, is expecting a callback, and I've explained this in before. What is callback? Callback are just functions that you are passing to another function. So which means this map is expecting a function from us, and whatever function we pass into it and whatever we are returning from that function, that's what is going to use for each one of the elements that we have in this array that you are calling before the map. So here now, the function you want to pass to it here is going to receive 3 things, but the first one is what we need. As you can see right now, since I'm not returning any stuff, it means for each one of the value here, as you can see, we are returning undefined. So it's going to map 1 to undefined, it's going to map 3 to undefined, 5 to undefined, and so forth like that, because I'm not returning anything yet. But if I want, I can just return 1. So, and as you can see here, for the first value, it's going to map it to 1. The second value, it will still map it to 1 because it is constant. The third value, it will map it to 1. And the last value, it will map that one to 1 to 1. That's the reason why you see that we are getting 1 1 1 as a result of what we have there. But this is not what we want. what we want is that we want this thing to be square of each one of the number. But how do we get each one of the number from this function here that we are passing into map? So the first thing you are going to have here is a value. And what is the value? The value is whatever this function is sending to you at a time. So the first time, the value is going to be 1. The second time is going to be 3. The third time is going to be 5, and so forth like that. So which means the value is each number starting from the first one all the way to the last. You always get all of them. But value will be changing based on whatever this thing is giving you. So the next thing you have is the index. So what is the index of the value? This is 1, so index is 0. This is 3, the index is 2, and so forth like that. So if I return the index now, you see that for each one of them, it's going to map them to index. And as you can see, so for the first value, it will map it to its index. The second value, it will map it to its index, because this is 1, this is going to be 2, and this is going to be 3. But this is not what we want. We actually need our value. And what do we want to do with the value? So we want to just do value, then multiply by the raised to power 2. And as you can see now, we're able to map this number into their square. And what am I using here? This is an operator here. So and what this thing is saying is that it's going to be raised to power of this thing here like that. Like this. So who is calling me by this time and I'm disturbing my network? Hello, can you see? All right.
Okay, boss.
Now, look at it. I have this number and I want to map it to another set of number. And what are we using here? So I'm using the value that is giving us, and I'm taking 2 to the power of it like that. So which means for each one of the value here, so what is the value? The first time is going to be 1. The second time when this thing is run again, because map will keep calling your function until it get to the end of the array there. And whatever you are returning from your function, that's what is going to use as the new value. But it's not replacing your old array. It's only returning back a new set of array. So which means whatever you are doing here is not replacing your old array. What you are going to have, if I call number or num like this, you see that we are still getting our old value. So it's not replacing it. It's just generating a new set of array based on whatever you pass into this map. And we can use the same knowledge here too in React. Look at what we are doing here. We are returning another set of value. So instead of us returning a value like this, we can now return a component. So instead of us returning value, so what we can do is that this our list here, we're going to map all the data that is inside it into a component. And for each one of them, you just return whatever details that you want the React to render for you on the screen. So here now, what I can do is just to call my list, then but map, because map is a function of array on array there. And since this is array here, so my VS Code know that we can call the map on it like that. So inside this place, don't forget we need to supply our callback, which is the function that we want this map to keep running every time the value is being passed into it there like that. And whatever we are returning from here, that's what React is going to see, and it's going to display for us on the screen. And what do we want to return? So for each user, so we need to receive the value. So I'm calling it user here. You can call it anything. Yeah, I'm calling it value, but don't forget the value is just representing each one of the items that you have in your array there. So which means this user for the first time is going to be this entire object. Don't forget this is the value. So this is going to be the second one, and so forth like that, depending on the number of items that you have in your array there like that. So what do we want to do? We don't want to do it like this. Instead of us hard coding the component like this, so we want to return this set here. We want to return this component. And what do we want to return? User info, not information. This AI is doing nonsense. And what do we want to do? So I want to pass, don't forget, we need to pass some props into it. And what are the props? Don't forget now, what we want to pass to it is not just a string. It's coming from this user. And don't forget, this user is just an object that contains full name and the job. So how do we do it? We need to use our expression there like that. So in front of it, we just need to pass the user, then dot full name like this. Why am I using full name? Is because that's the structure of the object. You need to know the structure of your data before you can start doing anything. But based on this, our list, we are mapping them to a component. So for each one of them, is going to call this component. And once this component is called, it will set all the necessary props that that component is expecting from us. If the component is not expecting any props, just leave it. But if you're expecting any props, then you have to pass it like that. But there is something that is going on here. where a lot of developer used to make mistake about it is because yeah, you're going to see there's a mistake here. But for now, I will just type everything in full. So the next thing we need to pass into it is the job. And where is the job coming from? It's coming from user dot job like this, because it will be giving us each one of them, and I'm calling it user. So this is going to be the user for the first time. Then the next time this map call the function, then the user is going to be this entire object. If there is another list again, it will call it the third time, and so forth like that, depending on the number of items that we have there. But if I save this in, you are not going to see anything on the screen. You are not going to see anything on the screen. Can you guess the reason why we are not going to see anything on the screen? Can you guess? Can you guess?
Is it because is it
Can you see
because you
that nothing is
haven't
shown? Is it because of what?
because you have not yet returned the okay, you have already returned the value though.
I'm not returning the value. That's a mistake here. What I pass here is the curly brace. Before you can return
Yes.
before the thing will show you a value, don't forget you need to return. Can you see there is a return keyword here? But if you look our own, we are not actually returning anything. What we are returning, that means we are returning undefined. And you know that React will not show anything on the screen if you return undefined. If you pass undefined to React, you will just see empty stuff on the screen. So yeah, in order for this thing to work, we need to return so that we can get our value. But this thing is still complaining right now, which is something I'm going to come back to later, because anytime you are dealing with a list, that is something you need to pass to your component are there. But for now, I'm not going to pass anything. I will just go to there. And as you can see, we are getting our value now. But if you look at it in the console, we are getting this warning. It's not an error, it's just a warning, and it's something that you should take note of there. Can you see what it's saying? Because we actually know that you are dealing with rendering of list. And as you can see, what it is giving us. So each child in a list should have a unique key props. So anytime you are dealing with something like this, we call it list. So you are rendering a list. But when you are rendering this thing, React is seeing them as the same thing because it's the same component. But how React is going to differentiate from one user info from the other one? Because right now, React doesn't know that this user info for the first user is different from the second one. It's just seeing them as the same thing. So how is it going to uniquely identify each one of the component that you are returning here? So we need a key. And what is the key? Whatever you give at the key, it should always be unique for each one of them, because that's what it's actually asking from you. You need a text that you can put here, or anything that you are putting here, that will differentiate this first user info that will be generated for this one, and the second one will be generated for this one, and so forth like that, depending on the number of this thing you are generating it. And anytime you are doing this thing, you should always use something that is unique, because the name is not unique, the job too is not unique. No, I can just come down here and we're going to have another person with that same name. For example, here we have Banty. Why the job is going to be, what can I even put here? So I can just use put Bola like this. So you can see the name is not unique. You can't say the name is unique because people used to bear the same name. A lot of people bear the same name. Again, to job too, that one is not even unique because a lot of people used to do the same job. So, but anytime you are working with your list, you should always use something that will make each one of these items here to be unique. And one way of doing it, the simple way, which is not recommended here, is by using the index. Don't forget, anytime you are working with map, it will give you three items. The first thing it's going to give you is a value. And here we are calling it user because you can call it anything. The second thing is going to give you is index, the index of the value. So which means here, the index of this one is going to be 0, the index of this one is going to be 1, and the index of this one is going to be 3. So which means you are going to be getting 1, 2, 3, and so forth like that, depending on the 0, 1, 2, 3, depending on the items that you have in your list like that. But you can call it anything. So it's only the second one. This thing is based on position. The first one is always the value. The second one is always the index, and the last one is always the list that you are working with, which is the array. But most of the time, you don't need this third one like that. Even the second one says you don't need it. What you will always be using most of the time is the first one here, which is the actual value that you want to pass into your component in case you need to do something like that. And sometimes you don't even need to pass anything, then you don't even need all of them like that. But most of the time, you always need this first one like that. And since yeah, I don't really have any unique stuff here to use as my key, so I'm going to use index because my list, the first one is going to be 0, the second one is going to be 1, the third one is going to be 3, 2, and so forth like that. But when this list, if it's a list or if it's something that you can reorder, maybe the first one here, we go to the second one, there's some way this thing is going to work properly like that. And that's why the index is not good to use like that. But when you're working in a real sense, whatever data you'll be working with, you need to have something there that is differentiating the first item from the second one, and that you can use it as ID or as a key. But here now, I'm going to use index because my list is not going to change here. So, and I'm not reordering anything, so that won't be a, but you need to give it the key. And once you give it the key, then React is going to be happy and it's not going to bring any error for us again. So anytime you're working with a list, you should always um use map. Then from your map, you return back the component that you want to display on the screen. And this thing that we just did now, we don't care about the number of users. So if you have user there now, so if you add another user to the list, we don't need to come into our code again here because this thing is dynamic. So whatever you add here, it will re-render your list here. And once you do it again, it will map over this stuff one by one again, and it will return whatever you pass into it. But yeah, you will not even notice because this is just simple stuff, and your depending on your computer, this thing is really even fast. No matter how slow your computer is, this thing is really fast like that. So you not even see that it's actually changing, even if you're adding to the list there like that. And this is what I mean by that. So if I come down here, I can add another items to the list. So full name is going to be Orekelewa like this. And what is the job like this? So if I save it and go to the page now, you see that we are going to have the items. You don't need to start going to where you want to render the list and start doing copy and paste. No, based on the item that is coming from our list, we map over it, and for each one of the item that is here, we are returning this user info, and all the necessary stuff we need to send the user info, we are sending to it. And this is what we call rendering list, and it's something you are always going to work with a lot when you are dealing with React there, because on the page there's a lot of items that you want to display that follow the same pattern. So what do? You put them in a list, and you use map to iterate over the items, and based on the item, you map it to a corresponding component that you want your each item to display on the screen there like that. And we're going to be using this thing a lot. So we are going to be using this thing a lot. And as you can see from the sample that this site is using there, so they have a list of cars that they want to display. And that cars is having ID and it's having a brand. So are you not going to be calling cars as zero and you'll be passing it? No. What do? You map over the data. So, and as you can see, it's doing the same thing here. So select, you have your array, map over it, you receive each one of them from your callback, and from there you can render anything that you want to show on the screen. It doesn't need to be a separate component. It can just be a text, it can be anything that React can render. Just return it from this your map, and you are going to see it on the screen there, which is something that we can actually use for this stuff here. So look at it. We have these three items here, and what can we do there? So what we can do here is to create a component for one of them. Then we have a list of all these items. So we have a list of all these text, and from there we just render it out there like that. So let's quickly do this. So let's quickly do this one here. So what do we need to do? So the first thing we need to do, so let me just comment out everything here, and from there I'm going to create a component that's going to do all this magic. And I'm just going to call it this render list like this. So this is the name of the component. We don't have it yet, so I'm going to create it down here so that I don't disturb myself there. So let me comment out everything that is here so that we know we are focusing on a particular thing at the time. So here we are going to call it a function. So render list. If you like, you can use arrow function, but right now I'm using the function keyword. So what do we need to do? We need to return something. But what are we returning? So it's just going to be a div, and inside the div we want to render out these items here. So you need to look at the UI first. So what is going on with this UI? So what do we have there? We have this box, and inside the box you have this radio button, and again you have the text beside it. So this is a component, but this component we want to render it multiple times there, and we don't want to be duplicating the code by ourselves. So we want to use list. are there. So we need to have array of all these text along with the key are there. And from there, we create this single component and we render it inside that our rendered uh, component there. So here I'm going to have another component here, which I'm going to call it list like this, or let me just call it list item. And this list item, what the job of it is just going to be that stuff that we saw there. So this is going to be div, and inside the div we are going to have radio. So we're going to have the radio, and at the same time we're going to have the text, which is something that we're going to receive from the props like this. So down here I'm going to have the inputs of type radio, because that's what is going to give you that circular stuff, which is something you know already. So it's not going to be of type text. So I don't know why I'm creating a class. That's not what I'm supposed to do. It's supposed to be like this with colon. So here it should create a input type of radio for me. The name, don't forget when you're dealing with radio, and if you want them to be connected, the name have to be the same thing. So here I'm going to call it question like this. The ID, I don't care about it. And if you want to connect it to your label that is going to be here, you can actually give it a ID like that. So which means that anytime you click on the label, it's as if you already click on the input, which is something I'm going to do. But where am I going to be getting this label from? But the label needs to be unique. It needs to be related to whatever content you are working with like that. So yeah, I'm going to convert it to backtick, which I'm going to call it radio. And in front of it like this, I'm going to generate some stuff, so which is coming from props. So props dot ID like this. Whatever you pass as the ID, that's what is going to use as the ID of this input. But why am I doing like this? Is because whatever the ID you pass for this one, that's what is going to be for the label, as you can see here. And this is what is going to connect the two of them together. So I have the label. The HTML4 is going to match the ID of your radio. And since the both of them are matching, anytime you click on the text, it's as if you are clicking on the radio. We've talked about all this thing before when we're dealing with our normal HTML. So we have the component, and again, we can actually style it if you need to put any style. So which I'm going to give it class name. We've talked about the styling last time. So I'm going to give it the list item. So this is the class. But where is the class going to come from? Don't forget at the top here, or this is not it. So inside our main.gsx, we already imported our index.css. So this index.css, we are using it already, which is coming from main.gsx. If you look at it at the top, it has been imported. And since the app is being rendered under this particular file, it means app have access to whatever that is coming from this index here, and that it is global because it is coming from our main file. So if you go down and if I style this thing based on the name that is, so we have the list item. So this list item is going to have a background of this RGBA 00. What can I even use? So let me just use red so that we can see what is going on. Then this one is going to have a border radius, which is the round edge around our distance, that's around 0.5 rem. Then what do we need to have? A padding like this, 1 rem, like that. So this is going to be display of flex. Then this is going to align the item vertically. It's going to put the radio and the label vertically there. So what do we need to do? Again, I think that's all for this one. So inside this list item, let me even give it a gap so there is no space. So 0.5 rem like this, which is going to be 8 pixels. So after this, our legs. So what do we need to do? Let me increase my screen so that this thing can appear more. So inside this list item, we actually have a label. So what do we want to do with the label? So the color should just be white, like this. I think it is white before. Let me see if it is okay like that. But I'm going to use flex of one so that I can take the remaining space that is left in the parent. We've talked about all these CSS stuff before, so I don't need to be wasting my time on this thing. So what do we need to do now? So we need to go into our app.jsx here, and inside it we need to render this out because this thing is not rendered yet. As you can see, it's gray out, so which means you are not using it here. So if I go to the UI, you're not going to see anything. So we need to render it like that. But what we'll be thinking, okay, let's just render it out like this. Again, I'm going to render another one down here and so forth like that. So we have like 3 here, and if I save it, this thing is going to work like that. So it's still going to work, but this is not what we want to use, because later on when you're working with the data that is coming from the API, there's no way you know the number of items that you want to render. So you can't be doing it upfront. it have to happen later on. But you actually know what will be coming back, oh, but you don't really know what you don't really know the number of items you want to display. You know the shape that is going to follow, but you don't really know the number of items. So what do? You receive the list, and once you receive the list, then you render whatever you want to render on the screen there. And I'm not seeing anything. Am I not entering my yeah, it will never show because we did not return the component yet. We only call it, we did not return it. So in order for it to show on the screen, we need to render. And as you can see, we have our component. But don't forget here, if I click on this, can you see that it's working? And as you can see, that it's switching. Why is it switching? It's because of the name. When you are dealing with radio, in order for it to switch, all of them must have the same name. And don't forget, we're using a single component. And since we're using a single component, that's why I gave it this name question. So since all of them are the same name, it means if you select one of them and you later click another one, it will remove from the previous one and go to the next one there. But this UI is really bad. I don't like displaying bad UI on the screen, so I'm going to make this thing look nicer than what we have. So yeah, I'm going to use all this color that we have at the top there. So instead of using this red, I'm going to use the orange at the top there. So orange. Then let me check the other color that we have there. I think this one should be okay. And again, too, all these list items, they are not really having. So I want to select the appearance, but I don't want to stress myself. So here I'm going to have a div that has dot list item like this. So if you can find a div that have list items inside it, what did I want to do? I want to display it as flex because those items are two jam packed together. I want to give it a flex direction of column. They should be on top of each other, and the gap is going to be 2 rm so that you can see what I actually did here, whether this CSS works or not. So if I go back to the screen like this and select it, can you see there is now a space in between each item? But how did I select the div? This is one of the selector you can use there. And what did I do there? I have a div, but I only want to select a div that is having these particular items inside it like that. But this 2 rm is too big like that. So let me just use 1 rm, and I want each one of the items to just be flex one like this. Should I use flex one? Because I want each one of them to cover up the parent even space. I don't know. So let me give this one a width like this to be 100% because everything, yeah. And as you can see now, they are now covering up what is going on there. So I don't even need to use this flex one again. So like that. And I think this one is too much. So let me use around that 50%. But it's not going to be center. So margin inline should be auto. And if I save it and go back to the screen, we should have them at the center like this. But the that text is not something that I want like that. So text is not okay. So I'm going to use color of white so that it can come aside on that orange color. Yeah, so as you can see now, we have the text. So if I click on the second one, it will activate it. If I click on the third one, it will activate it. But don't forget what we said here. There's no way this thing is going to be practical when you don't really know the number of items you want to render upfront. So what do? The items you want to render will be coming in a form of list, and you know the shape of it. So instead of us now calling it by ourselves like this, what we can do is to have the list of all the items. So for example, here I'm going to have the list, and inside the list we are going to have it as object because I want to have the ID. Except if you want to use the index as ID, which is something I will just do rather than creating the object myself, because that's going to be a waste of time. This is not what I asked you to do. What is this AI generating for me? So I have a bounty like this. I have this name. I have this one and so forth like that. So now, instead of us doing like this, so we just need a single list item and we render it based on whatever the list we have. So here we need to convert it, and as you can see, my AI here has already completed what I need. So I have the list, I'm mapping over it, I receive the value, which is something you can call anything. So you can call it anything. Right now, it's called user. So this list item is expecting ID from us. and it's expelling the text in the props, because that's what we're using down here. And as you can see, we're using index for our ID for now because it's just a simple list. And don't forget, you need to pass key, because this is what React is going to use to differentiate one list item from the other one when you're working with a list. And if I save it here now and go back to the screen, you see that we still have the same items like that. And I noticed that this thing is not showing me that it's something that is clickable, because your list item is something that you can click. So to be nice, if we just give it this cursor of a pointer there like that, so that it gives the user the feel of something that they can click. Yeah, you can see it's more manageable here like that, because anytime I click on this, but it's not really working for what is inside it, so I can actually talk to what is inside it to be clickable instead of me wasting time. So here now, so this list items, so everything that is directly inside it, they should have a cursor of pointer too. So which means it will affect everything inside it too, like that. Or I can just say inherit. So whatever this one is using, they are going to inherit it like that. But let me just do it like this. As you can see, if I go anywhere in the box, it's going to show that it is clickable like that, as you can see. So because it is, you can click anywhere in the box and it will still work. And that's why I'm putting this in on it. But why is it still working? Is because this your text, it's actually getting down here. But because there's no background there, that's why we're not seeing it. But the major thing here is we are talking about the list, and we're able to do something like this. And you can see that's kind of like a design here that needs to go along with it. With the help of our component, we are talking to only one of the component, but anywhere you're using the component, they are having the same effect, which is something I can do here too. So the list item, so anytime it is over, what do I want to do? I just want to reduce the opacity, or if you want, you can just change the background or do something else with it like that. So I will just change the opacity to 0.8 so that it can give me a feel of something like it. But their own, they're actually changing the background, not they are dealing with the opacity there like that. And if I go there, as you can see, we too are going to have a feel of something like that. But it should be better if you change the background instead of using opacity, because it's affecting the text that is inside it too, like that. So rendering of a list is very important, like that, and something that you always use a lot. What is time? I hope you are still here.
Yes, 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 I'm
All
here.
right, so that's all about rendering of a list. But what do we want to do next? We want to talk about handling the events and the states. This is where I will stop for this two. So we need to handle the events that is going to be happening on this our element. For example, here now, anytime I click on this text, whatever I'm clicking on, I want it to display at the top here, the name you pick, or the answer that you pick from the list here. So whatever you pick from the list here, I want to display it at the top here. But how do we get the value of what we are clicking on? So this is where event comes in. So event is what you can use to listen for any action or any action that is going on the screen. And we have different events that you can listen for. One of them, and the most popular one, is click event. So as you are clicking on the element, the browser is firing an event, but we are not listening for it. But we can talk to React to do something for us anytime a particular element is clicked in our component. So anytime a particular element is clicked in our component, we want it to do something for us. And you can see I'm clicking some area. This thing is not working. Is because it did not actually cover up the entire box like that, which is something I can fix by just going back into that place. So that label, we can just give it a height, because the thing is not covering up the entire height, which is just going to be 100% like this, but it might still cause some stuff, but that's not the major thing right now. So clicking, it should kind of work now. But if you click some area that the thing is not activated, as you can see, there's some area too that is not touching because we are apply padding. So it will not be able to get to that part. But for now, we don't care about that. We care about the React functionality that we are talking about. So let me increase my screen so that it can come out very well. And what did it say we want to do? So as you are clicking on any of these texts, whatever text you are clicking on, we want to display it on the screen here. So how do you now add events in React? We've talked about how to do this in normal JavaScript by using event listener. So we talked about how you can add events in JavaScript by using event listener, or by working on the element itself directly by using on, then followed by the event name. Or in JavaScript, you can use the element dot on the event and you send it to whatever function that you want to run. But in here, we don't do it like that because we have access to the element that we want to work with already here in our file. Don't forget, this is a component, and the component is using this JSX. So since this JSS is giving us all the functionality of React, the CSS, or it's giving us the functionality of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together, I like that. So we can actually add events. But how do you add events? So the add event on your element, just go to any element that you want to the event to be there like that, and you're going to start with on, then followed by the name of the event. And as you can see, the moment I type on here, all the events that can be applied are coming out, and it's not less for you to pick the one that you want there. But the one we actually want, which is the most popular one, is this click here. And what do you want to do? So whatever you'll be doing here is going to be a function. So you need to pass a function to here, because whatever function you pass here, that's what on click is going to call there. But we won't be passing it directly here because we want this thing to be manageable there. So we want to be able to manage our React application. And instead of you bombarding your code by putting the JavaScript code here, the HTML and the CSS together, you can separate them still too. So what do we do? So before they return, whatever JavaScript action, like the function and some other stuff that you want to do, can come here like that. And as you can see, so I have this function, but I only want to run this function. I only want this thing to be run anytime the label is clicked. So what do we need to do? We just need to pass the name. Please, what you need to pass is the name of the function. You don't call it, because if you pass the bracket, you are the one calling the function like that. But that's not how to pass a function to your function. You can actually do it here directly, but this is the best way of handling it, because you can quickly work on this your function here without being distracted by what is going on here. But if you just pass it here directly, for example here, I can just pass my function here and still run it. It will still work, but this is a bad practice here. So I'm only going to pass the name, and yeah, this is the basic stuff that we just did now with handling of event. So we are handling the click event on this element. Once it is clicked, this is the action we want to carry out. And if I go back to the screen now, what is it going to log out? It's going to log out the ID of each one of the label we click, because the component is actually receiving the props. So if I click on this, as you can see, it's giving us the ID of this particular item that we click. So if I click on this one, it will give us the ID of that one. But that's not what I want. I don't need the ID. What I actually need is the text that we pass into it. So don't forget, everything is coming from the props, and everything your component have access to props, whether in your JSX element or in the JSX is the statements that you have there, because this is a statement here like this. So you can use it too inside your JSX element. And if I go back to the page, clear the console, click on raster, you see that we get a value. Click on precious, you see that we get a value. Click on void here, you see that we are getting the value. So we get the value. What next? So after getting the value, what next? The next thing is that we want to be able to display the value here. As you are changing the value, whatever value you pick, it's going to display here. But how do we display the value? So how do we display the value? So where they are coming from is this parent. So at the top here, I'm going to have h1, and whatever I want to put inside this h1 is going to be any value that you click here. But how do we send the value from here down to this place here? So which means this function here, we need to move it up so that we can have access to whatever you click, because here now, this is a component on its own, and this is another component on its own. And whatever that is going on here, you can't just have access to it in the parent. You can do it later on, but for now, you can't have access to it, because you can only send down props to children. You can't send a value from the children to the parent there. Look at it, the rendering list is the parent, while this list item is a child. So from rendering list, you can send down some props to your list item. But from the list item, you cannot send anything back to the parent. It's not possible. So Right now, it's not possible, but later on, you are going to see how to handle this when we are talking about the state management there. But right now, it's not possible. You can't send something from the child to the parent, but you can send from the parent to the child. And this is what we call one way here. We yeah. So because we have two-way data binding and we have one-way data binding. So when you're talking about one way, it always move from top to the bottom. But some of the this in framework there actually allow two way data binding. So which means as you're sending down, that one that is down too can send back up. But in React, you can't do something like that. The only thing you can do is to take from the parent and you pass it to the children. You can't pass from any of the child and send info to the parent. It's not possible. So since we can send information down to the child, so instead of us having this function down here, what we can do is to lift it up to this place. So put it in the parent. But now there is going to be a problem. Where is the props coming from? So there is nothing like props again. So we need to send this function down. So this function need to receive whatever the name that we are sending are there. But how is it going to get the name? So how is it going to get the name like this? So we need to send a function down to this one. And don't forget again, there is nothing like this handle click inside this one. So we are going to be receiving it later on from the props because you can send anything down, whether it is function or a simple value or anything. You can send it down to components. So we are saying this on click in handle click. We are not having it again inside this component. We are going to be receiving it from the props. And this is what we have there. But right now we are not sending it yet because the thing we are only sending are this. So how do we send this one too down? So we can just come here and just say this handle click and we send down the handle click. But there's a problem with this method. There is a problem. So if I save it, it will work, but this thing here is not going to receive what we are expecting. So let me save it. So let me save it and go back to the page because what this thing will be sending is different from what we are actually receiving there. It's not going to be named. So if I click on it like this, can you see what we are receiving? Because anytime a function is called, anytime a function is called in this way, this on click is going to send down the event that occur to it. And that event that occur is what this thing is receiving here. But how do we talk to this thing that we don't want it to do like that? So this is where we are going to handle this stuff. So what we can do here is to create another function that one is going to call. And when the function is called, then that one is going to call this our handle click. And what do we need to do here? We just need to pass the user. So anytime, look at what I just did here. This is a function on its own. But the job of this one is that anytime this handle click is called, this is what it's going to see. And once you see this one, it will call it. And when this one is called, then this one too will be called because this one will call this, and when this one is done, it will call this one too. So what we are actually sending down here, this handle click, is just this arrow function here. So I'm using arrow function for simplicity there. But if you want, you can actually use normal function like this, which is just waste of typing to me. So like that, as you can see, it's still working. Or if you want, you can even give it name like this. But this is waste of typing. Instead of me doing it like this, I can actually use arrow function directly because it's still going to do the same thing. This is what we normally use arrow function for most of the time like that. So this handle click that we are passing down is going to be this arrow function. And anytime this handle click is called by this on click, it will fire this arrow function. And once the arrow function is fired, you know it will perform whatever is inside it. And what is inside it is going to call this one. Please, you can't just pass this in like this. That's why I'm doing it. You can't just pass it like this because you are not the one. You are not to call the function yourself. You have to pass it because now what you are doing is that you've already called the function, and you are now passing what you've called down here. So which means what you are passing here is undefined. And that's this one we have to wrap it in another function. So that by the time this one get down here, this is what is going to be see arrow. And once you see arrow, it will call it when this event fired. And when it's done, that one too, we in turn call this one because anytime this function is fired, this is what it's going to do. And what is it doing? It's calling this function too. And if I go back to our screen, you see that if I click raster, I'm getting raster because the function will only be called when that arrow function is called. So if I click this one now, the arrow function will be called, we get a value. If I click this one, the arrow function will be called, then it will call what is inside it too, which is going to be this handle click. Now that we have access to the name, so what do we want to do? We want to display name inside this h1. But how do we send name down here? This is another problem. So how do we send name down here? because can you see? So how do we send name down here or the user? For example, I just want to call it user. So this one is going to be user and this one is going to be user. But where is user coming from? So where is user coming from? As you can see, it's complaining already. So this is where state comes in. Because now we need to keep tracking of this value. Whatever value you click here, we need to keep tracking it inside our component. And how do you keep tracking your value? That's where state comes in. And how do you declare a state in React? Because you can't just do it like your normal JavaScript that you just say let user like this, and by default it's just going to be empty. So let's just say let user equals to this empty, and anytime this name is passed like that, what do we want to do? We just want to say our user is going to be name. But this one will never work like this. It will never work. Why is it not going to work? So we come back into it. Let's just go to the screen and try that. So right now it is empty, and the reason it's empty is because nothing is inside it. But now if I click on it, this thing is changing, but we can't see the value. Why can't we see it? Is because of the way React works. So, and this is the way it works. Anytime you make changes to anything in your component, it's going to trigger a render there. So what does that mean? It means React is going to call your component again. It's going to run it again. And when this thing is running it again, it will see where you are declaring a list. You've already changed the user here to another value. Okay, set the user. But the user actually changed. If I console log out the user from this function here, you see that it's actually changing. But after the stuff changing this function, React sees that a value has changed. A value inside your component has changed. And since the value has changed, React will record this to your component again so that you can see the new value. But by the time React will now get to this line, you see that you are now setting it back to empty string. And that's what is going on there. So anytime it change here and React record this our component again, it will see it on this line that we are setting user to empty string. Because anytime it calls this your component, it's going to do everything again and again that you pass into your component. And it always calls this your component again and again, anytime something changes. But the reason why you are not seeing that something is happening like that is because we are just returning the same thing. So since you are returning the same thing, your eyes will not see that it's actually changing because the thing is really fast like that. But now if I click on this stuff like this, and if I click on this, can you see that we are getting the updated value, but the thing is still not displayed on the screen? But if I click Precious, you can see the name, the user has been changed to Precious on this line. But when the thing sees it that way, it changed to Precious, so React will just re-render this component. And once it's coming, when it will render it, it will keep running your code again. And when you get to this line 128, you see that you set the user back to empty. And that is why you are not seeing it here. Because before you get down here, it will already set it back to empty string. And since that will set it to empty string on the screen, you are not seeing anything. And that's the reason why we need another way of holding our value. And whatever value we put inside it is not going to reset it back to the starting value that we have inside our variable. And that's where we have states. So with the help of states, we can have access to a component that can hold a value between each render there, between each render of that your component. So as this component is re-rendering there, we want it to hold our value. Whatever updated value that we have there, that's what is going to hold, not that this stuff is going to change our value. And how do we do this? So in order for you to be able to do that in a functional component, we need to use something known as hooks. So in order for you to be able to do this, you need to use hooks in React. And one of the hooks that we're going to be using to achieve this thing is known as useState. And this useState, as you can see from the name, is helping you to kind of create a state. You tell it, you're going to talk to it that, okay, I need a piece of state, but as this component is rendering there, I want you to keep all my value for me. Whatever value, whatever the updated value that I have inside this component, when the component will render later on, I want to get it. Not that the thing is going to replace the sub. But we have a lot of hooks that you can use there, but the one that we're going to be using right now, which is the simplest one among them, is this useState. So and how do you work with useState? So you are going to declare a variable with just a tuple of value. And what is tuple here? You have a definite set of values. So you are going to be putting x and y here. I'm going to explain what is x and y. And here you are going to have useState. So this is a function that you need to import or the hooks there. Hooks are just function, but they have access to the React functionality there, like that. So you need to call it, and whatever you are passing into it, that's your default value. So this is what you want it to hold before you start changing it. So we call this one default value. So before this thing started changing from one value to another one, this is what is going to hold by default. And if you don't want it to hold anything, just clean this stuff out. So it will still work, but right now I want to show it to you there. So what is this X? So this X is what we call the value. So whatever you put inside the state, or whatever stuff is going to be changing to later on, this is where you are going to have access to it. So this is what is going to give you the access. So which means here now, instead of us declaring our user like this, what we can do is to call it user. So whatever you're having here, whatever variable you create here, it all depends on you. So you can call it any name, but whatever variable that is here is the value that you'll be getting from the state. But what is this y here? This is what we call the function, and this is the function that you're going to be using to update whatever that is inside state. You can't just update the stuff again like this, like the way we are doing it on this line. It will not work like this. It will not work. So you need to use the function that the state is returning for you to update whatever you want to change the value to. So here, I'm going to call it this set user, because we have a convention when you are creating a state. So when you are creating a state and you are creating a variable, so whatever variable you create here, the next thing you are going to have is set variable. And this thing is very, very important, because later on you are going to have a lot of the states. But how do you know which one you are getting the value from, and how do you know which one you are updating there? That's the reason why we have this set like this. So when you have a variable here, the next thing you just have the set that name or that variable. So which means here, if you have a state and it is a bounty like this as a name, then here you are going to have set bounty. So if it is alt that you have here, then this one is going to be set alt. It's not a must though, you can call it anything, but this is the convention, and you also will follow the convention, because you'll be working with other people, and since other people are following convention, you too, you have to do that, so that anybody that want to read your code later on, or you are collaborating with other people, you guys will be able to understand each other on time, because we have the way we used to do things here like that. So what do we need to do now? So we have the value. So how do we now update it? Just call, this is a function. You call it and you pass whatever value that you want to update your state with, like that. So here now, I will just pass the name. User is what we're going to be using to receive the value. Then set user is what we're going to be using to update the value. And when you update this value, React will see that something has changed in your component. So it will render this your component like this. And when this thing is rendered, your state will still be holding whatever value that you pass here into it, and you have access to it. And from there now, your app will start working like the way you are expecting it to work like that. So if I go back to the page now, as you can see, it's showing our default value. And if I don't want it to have anything, I just need to wipe it up like this, because at the starting point, we are not going to have anything. And I want this thing to be centered, so I'm going to use my style, which we talked about last time, to just give it this text align to be centered like this, because I don't want to go to the, because you know you're not going to be doing like this. So I'm just going to use it like that, so that I can put everything that we talked about together. Now if I click on bounty, can you see we get bounty, because our state is getting updated. And once the state get updated there, React will render your component. And once you render your component, it will see that there is a value here now, and that's what this thing is going to display on this line. If I go back there again, click on this text, as you can see, it will update the value, because we are actually changing it. How are we changing it? We are using this setter function that this use state is giving us. So it's going to give you two things: the value that is inside your state, and the function you are going to use to update the state. And once you call this set state, because you don't update this value directly, you have to use this function to update it. And once the thing updates, we have to do all this necessary magic behind the scene, and it will render your component. The component is rendering again, but because a lot of things here are not changing, so it will just look as if it's the same thing, but it is not. It's calling your component again and again anytime something change there like that. If I click on forward now, as you can see, it will update the state. Click on this, click on this, click on this, and so forth like that. So these three items that we talked about today, and other one that we've talked about before, you can start using it to build a simple single page application that doesn't require moving from one page to another one. But if you need a site that can move from one page to another one, then we need to talk about routing, which is something I'll be talking about tomorrow there. But all these things that I've been talking about, after routing, we're going to put everything together and just work on a minimal project there that just explain everything together. But the link that I sent to you, you can just go over it to read it down, which is this is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, which is this React router, because this is what you'll be using to create like what I have here. So right now we are on React, but now if I click on Bootstrap, you see that this page is going to load and it will take me to another page entirely. So if I click on this auto, you see that it will change the page that we have here and it will go to another one. So how do we to build something like this? Like we are clicking on a link and it's taking us from one page to another one. But in React, you are not technically going to a different page. What you are doing is that you are just changing component. So what you'll be doing there is to render different components based on the route that the user has supplied there. But the route they are going to be supplying there, you'll be the one that is going to define them. And how to define the route, that's where this React router comes in, because the file you are working with is just a single page, just a single HTML. And by default or in normal convention there is that if you want to add different pages, you have to create different HTML file. But we only have single HTML. That's where the name is coming from, single page application, because you only have one HTML file. But we want this thing to be acting as if we are moving from one page to another, and we don't want to do the magic by ourselves. So we now have this library which is integrated. It's not built by React, so it's integrated to the React there because you need to install it. As you can see, it's an external library like that, so that we need to install. And once you install it, then it's going to come with a lot of things that we can use here to create our routing. Like for example, like this one, you can have all these different pages, and anytime you click slash home, it will take you here. Anytime you click on slash blogs, it will take you to this component. Anytime you click on the slash contact, it will take you to the contact, or it will display the contact component for you. So how do you do all this thing? We're going to be talking about here. They are using the old method. This one too will work, but we're not going to use this their method here. We're going to use a new method that the library is actually, because they are this their doc is kind of old, and that's the reason I don't use all these tutorial online or go there, because most of their stuff they will show you is just old way of doing this thing. So we are going to go to the site of this React router itself, and you're going to see the new way they are doing their stuff. So we have this React router DOM like this. Currently it is version 6 or so, yeah, 6.24 like that. So what that site is showing us will still work, but they are not recommending that new. As you can see, they have a new way of doing things now, and that new way is what we are going to follow. As you can see, the way they are doing their own, this is the stuff. It's quite different from what that site is showing. So this is the method I'm going to teach you, because this is what the library is telling us to do, not that old way. You can see it doing that old way, it will work, but we're always going to follow whatever the project is doing like that. And we're going to talk about different stuff that you can do with the routing. But before we get to that routing, I will talk about hooks, because there's some stuff here that this library will be using that I need to explain the concept. So we need to explain the concept of the hooks. I need to explain what under the hooks we are going to be talking about the context, and how can you create a context, how can you create your own hooks, and so forth like that. So by the time we are now using this library, there won't be kind of like a strange stuff going on there, because they are going to be doing some stuff. And you see, can you see now there is use params here? This is hooks. So by the time we talk about hooks, anytime you see anything like this, you already know that this is hooks. And how do you recognize hooks? All hooks used to start with that use. That's the convention there. So anytime you are creating hooks, all of them will start with use. So that when you are working with other React projects, once you see the name, you already know what is going on. Just like our state, that you have state and you have sex state. So here too, anytime you see hooks, you already know, you know it from their name, because all hooks used to start with use, just like our use states. And we're going to create our own custom hooks tomorrow, and along with other necessary one that we need before we jump into this React router there like that. So that's going to be what? Cheese.